I only wanted to be lazy. So how did I become a single dad? Story time. Adrian carried the sleeping Charlie into the bedroom, then returned and placed a warm cup of honey water in my hands. I looked at the man who had quietly stood beside me for so long, and something in my chest finally softened. Adrian, you are a very good man. Maybe we should try being together. For the first time, the cold and powerful businessman completely froze. His eyes widened, and even his words tangled together. Yes, of course I will do my best. I could not stop myself from smiling. Somehow, the man who could control an entire company had become helpless because of one sentence from me. At that moment, I still did not know that this strange reality show, this money-obsessed child, and this secret fan who had followed me for so long would eventually become the family I had always wanted. This is Storytime, and this is the story of how I only wanted to live like a lazy salted fish, but somehow ended up becoming a single father and falling in love with the most unexpected man. Originally, all I wanted was to be a lazy salted fish, lying still and ignoring the whole world. Fate clearly had other plans. Pushed me straight into a children's reality show called Baby Come Home. Under a gray autumn sky and a wind cold enough to cut through bone, I stared at the contract that was about to expire between me and my entertainment company. My heart felt heavy, which was rather inconvenient because the heart inside this body was already weak enough. If I walked too fast, it started pounding wildly. If I stood too quickly, my vision went dark. My manager still forced me to accept one final job before my contract ended. I lay on the sofa and weakly protested. I really do not think I should go. My heart is not very good. He did not care. So I sighed, dragged my fragile body to the filming location, and decided that if I survived the day, I would reward myself by doing absolutely nothing afterward. The moment I stepped onto the wet, artificial grass, however, my mind went blank. I finally realized where I was. I had transmigrated into an entertainment industry novel I once read before I died. In the original story, the person whose body I now occupied was nothing more than cannon fodder. He existed to make other people look better. He was disliked by viewers, used by the production team, and eventually disappeared from the story without anyone caring. Then I saw the child standing among the group of children. His name was Charlie Carter. In the original novel, Charlie would grow up to become one of the most ruthless villains in the entire story. Right now, though, he was only a small and skinny boy wearing a faded shirt. He stood alone while the autumn wind lifted the edge of his clothes. He looked too quiet for his age and far too used to being ignored. My chest tightened. According to the original plot, the former owner of this body had humiliated Charlie during this program. That humiliation became one more wound in a childhood already full of neglect, and those wounds slowly hardened him into the villain he would become. Looking at the awkward little child in front of me, I decided that this time things would be different. Around us, the other celebrities were already fighting for camera time. Some pretended to adore children. Others worried that hugging a child would ruin their makeup. I stood to one side and watched the chaos as if I were watching free theater. The irritated director finally shouted for everyone to stop wasting time, then called my number. I pushed myself upright. My blood pressure dropped, the world spun, and I had to wait a moment before walking toward Charlie. He barely reached my thigh. I lowered myself into a half kneel and tried to make my voice gentle. Charlie, would you be willing to let me be your trainee dad? The little boy stared at me for several seconds, then gave a small nod. I took out the warm wool scarf I had prepared and wrapped it around his neck. This is a meeting gift for you. Charlie froze. His fingers touched the soft wool balls hanging from the scarf. After a long silence, he made a quiet sound in his throat that was probably his version of thank you. We walked hand in hand into the rest tent. Two celebrities inside were already arguing over who should be interviewed first. One insisted that she had arrived earlier. The other mocked her eyeliner and told her not to scare the children. I ignored them completely and led Charlie to an empty corner of the sofa. I leaned back and enjoyed the rare piece. Charlie kept staring at me. I reached out and gently poked his thin cheek. Are you still cold? He silently shook his head. His expression was solemn, like a tiny old man patiently tolerating an irresponsible adult. To make the atmosphere less awkward, I broke off a piece of chocolate and put it in his mouth. Eat a little. You need strength if you want to keep watching the drama. The sweetness seemed unfamiliar to him. His eyes widened, then curved slightly with pleasure. Without saying anything, he slowly shifted closer to me on the sofa. Perhaps the warmth of a stranger and one piece of chocolate were enough to begin melting a lonely child's heart. After the chaotic introduction on the lawn, Charlie and I were the last pair called into the interview room. We were so quiet that the staff almost forgot us until the director reminded them. I dragged my exhausted body inside. Charlie sat in one chair while I sat in another. I rested my chin on my hand. He lowered his head. Together we stared into space. A staff member asked why I had chosen him. I answered honestly, because there was nobody else left. Charlie nodded in complete agreement. The staff stared at us in disbelief. Our interview ended quickly because neither of us had any desire to perform for the camera. The moment we left the room, Charlie tugged my sleeve and struggled to say one word. Money. I paused, then laughed. There is no money for filming this kid. The light in his eyes disappeared instantly. I took the opportunity to teach him my personal philosophy. See, this is why people should not work too hard. If rushing forward does not earn more money, then lying down and resting is clearly the better choice. Nobody had arranged proper care for Charlie after filming, so I took him back to my small apartment. I bought him clothes that actually fit. Then I tried to give him a bath and nearly exhausted myself so badly that my heart wanted to resign. I collapsed on the sofa. That is enough work for 2 days. I am not leaving this house again for the foreseeable future. I tried to cook chicken soup for him, but somehow I produced a pot of suspicious pork water that smelled far worse than it looked. I stared at it, then at Charlie. How do you feel about delivery food? That evening, the two of us ate takeout and sprawled across the soft sofa together. Charlie quickly discovered that he enjoyed being lazy with me. He even copied the way I crossed my legs and sank into the cushions. For the first time in his short life, he seemed able to enjoy peace without worrying about what came next. Our peace ended when the production team ordered me to livestream. I had almost no fans, so I planned to turn on the camera, sit there for a while, and finish the requirement with minimum effort. I was drinking milk tea, but when Charlie stared at it, I told him it was bitter medicine mixed with milk so he would not ask for any. During the live stream, I told the viewers directly that I had no special talents. If they were bored, they were free to watch another room. For some reason, that honesty had the opposite effect. My sleepy face, the lack of effort, and the strange calm between me and Charlie attracted thousands of viewers. At one point, I left the phone unattended because I needed the bathroom. Charlie became angry, rushed over, pushed his hair away from his round eyes, and scolded me for being irresponsible. I immediately offered compensation. I was wrong. Tomorrow I will buy you 3 small bottles of milk. That night I had only wanted to finish the live stream quickly, but the number of viewers kept rising. I could no longer be openly lazy without feeling slightly guilty. When I heard that the official program had shown only 38 seconds of footage from me and Charlie, my new fans were furious. I was delighted. Less screen time meant less trouble. Before ending the live stream, I decided to calm everyone down by singing a soft song that I had written for Charlie. The child listened in stunned silence. I smiled and rubbed his hair. Of course it sounds good. I wrote it especially for you. I had no idea that this gentle moment had caught the attention of a cold businessman named Adrian Carter. I also had no idea that a devoted fan would edit my tiny amount of footage into a video that reached the trending list overnight. Before I accidentally ended the stream and went to sleep, a wealthy anonymous viewer even sent me an absurdly expensive virtual gift. The next morning, I planned to take Charlie out for a haircut and supplies. Instead, a ridiculous disaster happened at a convenience store. While I was getting hot water, Charlie picked up a yellow hat that had fallen near a kindergarten bus. The driver saw him holding the hat, assumed he was a late student, lifted him onto the bus, and drove away. I ran after the bus with my bottle in one hand, shouting until my lungs hurt. Stop! Stop the bus! The driver waved cheerfully at me as if doing me a favor and kept going. I stood there in disbelief. Then I forced my weak body into a taxi and chased them all the way to the kindergarten. At the gate, several teachers tried to comfort me while I explained between laughter and despair that the child they had just brought to school did not actually attend their school. Once I finally got Charlie back, I gave him a serious lecture. Next time you stay close to me. If you wander away, a bad person could take you. The noise of the kindergarten clearly frightened him. He nodded quickly. Since fate had already delivered him to a school once, I casually suggested finding a kindergarten for him in a few days. Charlie was drinking milk at the time. He immediately choked so hard that his face turned red. I patted his back and teased him. Look at that. You were so excited about school that you choked on your milk. Charlie dropped onto the sofa with the expression of someone whose life had lost all meaning. He firmly refused. The school plan had to wait because the reality show announced the official filming schedule. I packed our luggage and delivered the bad news. The day after tomorrow, we have to go to the countryside to film the first episode. It looks like school will have to wait. Autumn had turned the trees gold by the time we arrived at the next filming location. The moment I reached the set, I saw several young celebrities arguing with the writers because they wanted more scenes. I immediately took Charlie by the hand and stepped backward. Terrifying. My fragile body could not survive entertainment industry warfare. I found a quiet corner, used my suitcase as a chair, and slowly drank health tea. The other children were dragged away for makeup. I asked Charlie whether he wanted to go too. He looked at the crowded makeup area and calmly refused. So the two of us sat together and watched wild geese fly across the sky. I pointed upward and explained that the birds were flying south and that they even kept formation. Anyone watching us would have thought we were on vacation instead of working. When official filming began, my script was so thin that we were placed at the very end of the line. A celebrity in front of me turned around and mocked us, saying all our scenes would probably be cut. I did not care. I covered Charlie's ears and repeated that we could not hear anything. The man stared at me. I gently pushed him forward. You should hurry. Otherwise the people in front will steal all the camera time you want so badly. Charlie and I completed our scene with such expressionless efficiency that the director nearly missed it. The next challenge involved choosing which emergency items we could keep before selecting rooms. I fought hard for my small cooking pot and my bag of herbal foot soak medicine. Somehow, Charlie understood me perfectly. We made the same choices, and even the host had to admit that our strange father and son team had remarkable compatibility. Lunch was full of crying because several children had lost their favorite belongings during the challenge. I quietly ate tofu. Charlie slowly drank chicken soup and swung his short legs like a tiny wealthy chairman. I worried that he might feel lonely, so I handed him some chocolate and suggested sharing it with the other children. He accepted the candy, slipped all of it into his own pocket, walked around the noisy group once, then returned with a tired sigh. Perhaps he also felt too old for all that noise. At the end of the day, Ryan Blake, another male celebrity, was busy posing and showing off his looks in front of me. I looked at the child holding his hand and calmly pointed something out. Ryan, stop glaring at me. You are holding the wrong child. He looked down and froze. I laughed so hard that I nearly lost my breath. My laughter ended when the production team announced a cooking contest to decide room assignments. Charlie knew my cooking ability far too well and immediately offered to cook instead. I refused. He was not even tall enough to see over the stove. At the washing area, however, his talent for business already appeared. He persuaded a child named Chloe to wash an entire basket of vegetables for him, then calmly carried the clean basket away. I struggled for a long time just trying to light the stove. Charlie stared at me with obvious disappointment. I defended myself. Do not look at me like that. As long as food is cooked, it probably will not kill us. The final dish was nearly black. It received a record low score. Ryan looked personally offended because I had stolen the title of worst cook that he had been carefully building for himself. Even though we lost, the production team quietly gave us an old room on the second floor instead of forcing us to sleep in a freezing tent. The moment I lay down, I sighed with relief. The bed was not as comfortable as my sofa, but it was acceptable. While other families ate greasy boxed meals, I pulled out my secret weapons, the small pot and a bag of rice. Soon the room smelled of warm chicken porridge. I looked at Charlie proudly. Now you understand why I insisted on keeping the pot. The smell traveled far enough to attract Noah Reed, another male celebrity, and the child paired with him. They came to ask for food. I let them eat. Charlie watched them finish their bowls, then silently held out his tiny hand. 50 yuan. I immediately stepped in. What Charlie means is that this meal took 50 minutes to make. It was very difficult. Charlie stared at me with betrayal in his eyes because I had given away food for free. The next morning, the production team dragged us out of bed at 6 for the final mission. We had to peel corn to win a commercial opportunity. While standing in the yard, I accidentally inhaled face powder because Ryan was applying makeup beside me. I started coughing and waved him away. Ryan kept following me because he was jealous of my skin and wanted to know my beauty secret. He even suspected that my small porridge pot was actually some mysterious beauty treatment. Charlie immediately held out his hand. 500 yuan. I tapped his head. Please be quiet. He became offended and appeared to consider raising the price to 1,000. When I saw the mountain of corn in front of us, all motivation left my body. I told Charlie that going home early would not be so bad. A person needed to understand when to give up. Charlie silently studied the situation. Then his back straightened. He had an idea. Under the bright morning sun, the corn peeling competition began. Every other guest worked desperately. Charlie walked calmly toward Ryan, who was peeling as fast as possible because he was terrified that I would steal his screen time. Charlie delivered one perfectly aimed sentence. The person in last place usually gets the most camera time. Ryan froze. Then he rushed over and pushed me away from the pile. Move. I will do it for you. I watched him peel corn for us until sweat ruined his makeup. Ryan, are you sick? Thanks to Charlie's psychological strategy, the two of us rested while Ryan completed most of our work. At lunch, I gave Ryan a packet of chicken broth concentrate as thanks. Charlie immediately looked angry because I had once again failed to charge money. When filming ended, we returned to the city. My father had already sent supplies. He ran an online clothing shop and had somehow estimated Charlie's size by watching the live stream. He sent clothes, broth concentrate, and enough things to make it look as if Charlie had always belonged in the family. While my father talked endlessly about business over the phone, Charlie and I lay on the sofa and enjoyed our lazy life. I silently hoped my father's business would become successful enough for me to become a useless rich second-generation heir. Over the next few days, I started making Charlie study kindergarten-level material. He refused at first. Then I told him the course had cost money and that refusing to study meant wasting it. He immediately studied for 2 straight days. One afternoon, I took him to the park downstairs and filled his pockets with good candy so he could make friends. Charlie sat on a bench and calmly ate the candy himself while the children around him stared. A boy asked for one. Charlie refused. When someone called him selfish, he patted his full pocket and made the situation even worse by confirming that he still had plenty, but had no intention of sharing. At home, I saw that he was upset after I criticized him, so I rubbed his hair and explained the situation in language he understood. One piece of candy in exchange for not being isolated is an excellent business deal. Charlie went still. He was clearly recalculating the economics of friendship. While I continued living happily as a lazy man at home, the internet outside was becoming chaotic because of me. A devoted fan named Megan Zhao had been furious that the official episode gave me only 46 seconds of screen time. She stayed awake all night creating an edited video. The result made me look like an impossibly handsome man and made Charlie look like the coolest child alive. People clicked because of my face, then laughed until they cried when they saw footage of me nearly burning the kitchen behind the scenes. One popular comment said that Ethan Shaw possessed nothing except an excellent face. When flames rose almost a meter high, I had immediately grabbed Charlie and fled. The internet awarded me the title of cutest tactical retreat. I ignored all of it. Instead, I slowly drove Charlie on my tiny electric scooter to choose a kindergarten. Charlie wanted to save money and insisted that he did not need school. I could not leave a future villain at home to raise himself. Eventually, I found a decent kindergarten. We had only toured half of it before my legs gave up. I sat on a child-sized chair and struggled to breathe. The night before Charlie's first day, the weather became colder. I committed a successful crime against my own child. I waited until Charlie had warmed one side of the bed, then moved his sleeping body toward the colder side and stole the warm spot for myself. Charlie woke halfway and saw me climbing under the blanket with a satisfied smile. I told him not to worry about details. The world was wide, people could sleep anywhere, and he should go back to sleep before catching a cold. Raising a child for 1,000 days and using him as a bed warmer for one night seemed fair to me. The next morning, I sent him into class with a promise. Study well. When you come home, I will make seafood soup. While Charlie began planning a business at school that involved charging 5 yuan to use the slide, a member of the production team stopped me outside. He told me that I had become famous and was trending online. I had no idea why. I simply picked Charlie up early so we could prepare for the second filming session. He came through the school gate looking deeply regretful because he had not finished the seaweed tofu soup in the cafeteria. He called it a financial loss. The next filming location was an expensive theme park. Charlie's teacher assumed that I wrapped myself in scarves because I was a mysterious celebrity avoiding attention. In reality, I was simply terrified of cold weather. The moment we arrived, I ran into Ryan Blake again. He bumped my shoulder and tried to provoke me. I calmly asked whether the strange condition that made him stare at people had been treated yet. Then I sat on a bench, watched pigeons, and accidentally found one of the key puzzle pieces for the program without even trying. While I was enjoying the privileges of being lazy, Charlie had begun building his first serious business empire. The mission required people to take photographs. 2 young women asked for a photo with me because they thought I was handsome. Charlie stepped in front of me like a bodyguard and demanded 5 yuan. By the end of the session, he had collected money, snacks, and an entire box of food from tourists. That night at the hotel, he sold broth concentrate to Ryan. Charlie raised 3 fingers, meaning 300 yuan. Ryan misunderstood and paid 900 for 3 packets, then added another 100 as a tip in exchange for secrecy. He told Charlie not to tell Ethan and promised to buy more next time. Charlie calmly placed the money into his pocket without correcting the misunderstanding. I was in the bathroom and assumed he was playing with another child. The next morning, at the hotel restaurant, Charlie ran directly into the legs of Adrian Carter, the owner and major investor behind the theme park. Charlie looked up at him. He recognized Adrian from the leadership photographs on the wall. Then Charlie tried to sell him candy. Adrian refused. Charlie clicked his tongue and walked away, apparently concluding that rich people were difficult customers. Back in the park, Charlie immediately organized a child labor force. He told the other children to take photographs while he collected the snacks. After every 10 customers, he would pay them 1 piece of candy. He was already dreaming of hiring 100 children when Adrian appeared during an inspection. Charlie assumed that Adrian was coming to arrest children. He shouted for everyone to run. A line of small children scattered behind him like frightened ducklings, leaving Adrian standing alone with a very dark expression. Later, I rode the carousel under gentle autumn sunlight. I was so relaxed that I yawned. I decided to use the final ride on my ticket because wasting money felt wrong. That was when I accidentally met Adrian's eyes. He was walking with several staff members and looked stiff the moment he saw me. He immediately looked away and pretended we had never met. What I did not know was that inside, this cold businessman was almost screaming because he had finally seen his favorite celebrity at close range. While I enjoyed 2 luxurious rounds on the carousel, Charlie was facing disaster. Adrian had ordered park employees to stop the illegal businesses being run by Charlie and his tiny workforce. Charlie turned red with anger when he discovered that some of his child employees had eaten the candy they were supposed to sell. He nearly lost his voice shouting that the candy was inventory. Eventually, a staff member lifted him by the back of his shirt and carried him straight to Adrian's office. Charlie hung there with his arms and legs limp, looking like a captured criminal who had already accepted defeat. Inside the elegant office, Charlie still found time to inspect the furniture. He stood on his toes beside the desk and complained that it was too high. If he ever sat there in the future, he would not be able to reach the surface. Adrian coldly moved him aside and gave him a lecture about rules and legal business. Then he confiscated every snack Charlie had worked so hard to collect. Charlie collapsed onto the sofa like a salted fish that had lost its soul. He tried one final excuse. He could not read, so perhaps he could not be held responsible. Adrian was unmoved. He made Charlie personally give the confiscated snacks to tourists for free. Charlie looked as if his heart were being cut apart with every piece of candy that left his hands. At one point, he spent a long time choosing before reluctantly giving away the smallest strip of dried beef he could find. He announced that he would never take photographs again. The internet loved the strange combination of the cold, handsome businessman and the tiny child who treated snacks like corporate assets. Posts about them began trending. Adrian immediately saw profit in Charlie's idea and started thinking about how the park could turn photography into an official business. Charlie stood beside him with a serious expression and declared that he wanted half the commission. Later, Adrian personally brought Charlie back to the hotel lobby. I was sitting there wrapped in a wool scarf when I recognized him. I told him that we had met near the carousel. Adrian stopped moving for a moment. His voice became slightly unsteady when he realized that I remembered him. He confirmed that we had indeed met. Since he had kindly returned my lost child, I offered to invite him to a simple meal. Charlie objected immediately because he still hated Adrian for confiscating his snacks. Adrian obviously wanted to accept, but he forced himself to look restrained and told me to focus on filming instead. After saying goodbye, he went directly to a secret fan group and proudly announced that he had met Ethan Shaw, that Ethan had been gentle with him, and that Ethan had even offered to invite him to dinner. Back in our room, I casually remembered something while Charlie was preparing to sleep. I mentioned that the staff had returned one of my things and had also taken away the pile of snacks. Charlie sat up immediately. The curtains were closed against the afternoon light, and the room was so quiet that tiny particles of dust floated visibly in the dim sun. I had only made the comment without thinking, then fell asleep because I was exhausted. When I woke, I took Charlie downstairs. The cameraman looked at us with deep resentment. He had spent the entire morning running after Charlie through the park. I gave him an embarrassed smile and apologized for forgetting that he existed. To make up for it, I took Charlie for a walk in the afternoon sunlight. In reality, I mostly wanted fresh air so I would stay awake rather than complete any mission. Charlie had already recovered his calm. He walked with his hands behind his back like a future shareholder inspecting property. When some staff members greeted us, the two of us somehow misunderstood them and thought they were suspicious strangers. We ran away together. After only a short distance, I had to stop. If I kept running, I was going to end up in a hospital. That night, I was sleeping while holding Charlie when the director suddenly woke me for a ridiculous mission. The adults were supposed to pretend to be kidnapped so the children could rescue us the next morning. I was so sleepy that my eyes would barely open. I asked whether I could simply hide myself and return to bed. The director refused. I had no choice but to carry my blanket and pillow to the meeting room so I could continue sleeping there. While I was gathering the blanket, Charlie woke and asked what I was doing. I panicked and invented an explanation. I told him that I was taking the blanket outside to let it absorb moonlight. When I reached the meeting room, the other celebrities were still fixing their makeup. I quickly claimed a folding chair near the window, pulled the curtain around myself, and announced that I was going back to sleep. The director had no words left for me. Early the next morning, the park became chaotic when all the children discovered that their parents had disappeared. Evan, one of the children, tried to comfort another child with terrifying logic. He said that if one parent disappeared, the program would probably arrange a replacement. Watching through the monitor, I nearly sprayed water over Ryan. I patted Ryan on the shoulder and told him not to take a child's random words too seriously. Otherwise, people might think he was narrow-minded. Meanwhile, Charlie led the children in a rescue operation and immediately turned it into another business. He charged each child 20 yuan to join his search team. When some children had no money, he generously allowed them to owe him later. At one checkpoint, an actress dressed as a witch demanded that they solve a math problem to receive a crystal ball. Charlie tried to buy the prop instead. He offered 5 yuan with no negotiation. When the witch insisted on the math question, he calmly gave the correct answer, 38, and held out his hand for the crystal ball. Then he leaned closer and quietly asked whether she would sell her used magic wands as second-hand goods. The actress looked as if she wanted him removed from the set. Later, Charlie rested beneath a shady tree and saw a young woman running a fairy tale shoe stall. Because Adrian had recently punished him for selling candy without permission, Charlie marched over with a serious face and demanded to see her business license. The poor Cinderella character froze. Charlie decided that she was operating illegally and ordered the other children to watch her, while he hurried toward Adrian's office. He burst inside and demanded that Adrian arrest the woman. Adrian wanted to protect the filming schedule, so he lied and said that she had a special permit. Charlie was furious. Adrian quickly promised that if Charlie completed the mission, he would personally grant him special permission to run a business in the park. That finally calmed him. Before leaving, Charlie even asked the businessman for professional advice about which business could make money fastest. After Adrian left, Charlie temporarily forgot the rescue mission and led the children to the free hotel breakfast buffet. Some of them worried that taking food would get them arrested. Charlie explained that buffet food was free once they were inside and encouraged them to eat. After breakfast, they were preparing to rest when the director announced that only 20 minutes remained. If they failed to rescue the adults, the Great Demon King would take the parents away. Evan innocently asked whether the Demon King could remove his father from Earth permanently. I watched through the monitor and patted Ryan again. I told him that making every person dislike him was also a kind of talent. While the children panicked because they could not find the glass slipper that would reveal our location, Charlie secretly used the phone to call me. I answered while eating sunflower seeds and decided to help. I dramatically informed him that I absolutely would not tell anyone we had been taken to the meeting room on the 11th floor. Then I hung up. The director shouted my name in fury, but it was already too late. The children rushed to the 11th floor and completed the rescue. For the reward challenge inside a supermarket, most children grabbed toys. Charlie remembered that I had once complained that our house lacked a proper pot, so he struggled to pull out a large iron pot. Then, with only 20 seconds remaining, he ignored everything else and slapped his hand against a coin-operated rocking machine near the entrance. He wanted that instead. His plan was to place it at kindergarten and charge the other children 5 yuan per ride. Not long after, my father came to see us. His rough beard made several elderly women in our residential area think he was kidnapping Charlie. Security guards surrounded him with electric batons while he shouted that he was Charlie's grandfather. I hurried downstairs to explain. Before I could finish, pain tightened around my heart. My legs lost strength and I collapsed. When I woke in the hospital the next afternoon, Charlie was kneeling beside the bed and pulling on my hand. His cheeks were puffed from effort, and his eyes looked wet with worry. I smiled and told him to let me rest a little longer because I was still tired. I spent most of the afternoon explaining the importance of life and health to him. Then I sent him to get water for me. Charlie walked out holding a cup and met Adrian near the elevator. Adrian immediately asked whether Charlie was sick. Charlie looked at him coldly and pressed the button to close the elevator doors in his face. Adrian eventually had to promise him another rocking machine before Charlie revealed that I was the patient. Even while worried about me, Charlie negotiated payment. Adrian called him money-obsessed, but the moment he learned that I had collapsed, he became so anxious that he could not sit still. He was too embarrassed to appear directly, so he asked a nurse to deliver expensive fruit and supplements to my room while claiming that they came from a fan. Charlie's eyes turned bright when he saw the gifts. He carefully asked whether they were expensive. I was deeply touched. I thought that even though I was hardly famous, some wealthy female fan cared about me. I told Charlie that my fans were very kind. Outside the room, Adrian listened to the nurse's report with his neck turning red. He told her again to say that everything was from a fan and that he only hoped I would recover quickly. I had no idea that my mysterious wealthy supporter was sitting one floor below in a doctor's office, pretending to be a cold executive. Adrian wore rimless glasses and stared seriously at a folder as if studying a project worth billions. In reality, he was listening closely for every word the nurse said. When he heard that I had accepted the gifts and sent thanks, his hand tightened around the documents until the veins stood out. Inside, he was delighted. Outside, he maintained his calm expression. The moment he left the hospital, he returned to the fan group to brag that he had just sent gifts to Ethan Shaw and that Ethan was so kind he had even said thank you. Unfortunately, the other fans had noticed that this mysterious account seemed to encounter me far too often. They became suspicious and decided he might be an obsessive stalker. They removed him from the group without mercy. Adrian was furious. He could not understand why they refused to believe that Ethan treated him differently. After I recovered, I planned to send Charlie back to kindergarten. Charlie had other priorities. He wrapped himself in his wool scarf, put on a bright yellow hat, and pointed at the rocking machine he had won during filming. Then he ordered my father to transport it to the kindergarten. My father loved him so much that he loaded the machine onto a truck, convinced that his grandson wanted to share a toy with friends. The moment it was placed near the school entrance, Charlie raised 3 short fingers and began selling rides for 3 yuan each. One child had no money and started crying. Charlie remained completely unmoved. Even if the entire school flooded with tears, nobody was riding without payment. At that exact moment, Adrian arrived at the school as an investor. Charlie saw him discussing plans to donate new slides and swings for free. He became furious. He ran after Adrian's car and accused him of destroying his business. Adrian looked amused. He pointed out that Charlie's machine could not even be properly installed at the school, so there was hardly a business to steal. Charlie had no answer. Still, Adrian eventually surrendered to the child's persistence. He took Charlie across the street to a busy supermarket. "The school is not a good place to make money," he explained. "This place is better." Charlie watched the steady stream of customers and immediately approved. Thus began the strange alliance between a future villain and a powerful businessman. After the kindergarten plan failed because the machine could not be powered properly, Charlie did not lose hope. He stood outside the supermarket with his hands behind his back, looking like an investor inspecting a future branch. He pointed at an empty corner and ordered Adrian to place the machine there. Adrian maintained his cold expression but followed the child's instructions. One assistant commented that the two of them looked remarkably similar. Charlie immediately lifted his chin and said that he looked like his dad. I was not there, but I could imagine Adrian's reaction. In Adrian's mind, I was apparently some pure and gentle person. He probably refused to believe that I could resemble a child who smelled of money and business ambition. Charlie also made one thing very clear. The money earned from the machine belonged to him. Adrian could only grind his teeth and give Charlie the key to the cash box. Back at school, Charlie launched a marketing campaign. He bribed his round little friend Oliver with candy and jelly, then sent him around telling everyone that a rocking machine had opened at the supermarket across the street. I knew none of this. When I later saw Charlie standing near the machine, I felt sorry for him and pressed 2 coins into his hand. I told him he could ride twice. Charlie looked at me as if I were painfully innocent. Using his own money to pay for a ride on his own machine clearly made no sense to him. He handed the coins to Oliver instead. He told his friend to play because he did not want to. I was so moved by his generosity that I almost cried. I had no idea that my son had just fooled me with perfect sincerity. That night, I live-streamed songs for my fans and once again caused discussion online because of my voice. Charlie sat nearby writing a business plan in his diary. He recorded the first day of the machine business and distributed imaginary shares. He gave himself 80%, gave me 20%, and gave Adrian nothing. That night, he dreamed that he was buried under a mountain of money and smiled in his sleep. In the morning, I accidentally woke him and ruined the dream by reminding him that dream money was not real and that he did not actually possess piles of cash. Charlie became so offended that he stood by the window and refused to speak to me until breakfast. Winter was approaching, and the weather became bitterly cold. I wrapped Charlie in so many layers that he looked like a round black ball. On the way to school, I could not resist lightly nudging his padded backside with my foot. The round ball fell forward. Charlie turned and stared at me in outrage. I admitted that I had done it, pinched his soft cheek, and escaped before he could retaliate. At school, Oliver mocked Charlie's thick clothing and said it made him look like a black sesame rice ball. Oliver insisted that wearing less would look cooler. Charlie calmly warned him that wearing too little would make him sick. That afternoon, Oliver cried while receiving an injection because he had caught a cold. Charlie quietly tightened his padded coat and concluded that illness and lack of money were equally frightening. After school, my father picked us up and drove us to his hot pot restaurant for dinner. Charlie sat in the car staring seriously at the streets outside. I pinched his round cheek and asked whether he was thinking about macroeconomics. He made an annoyed sound. In reality, he was imagining a global empire of rocking machines. He leaned toward my father and sweetly asked whether the hot pot restaurant had a rocking machine. My father agreed immediately and even cleared the best corner of the restaurant for one. Watching my father spoil Charlie made my chest feel warm. Charlie, meanwhile, silently developed plans for the future of the restaurant because he believed I was far too gentle to manage a business. In his imagination, I would become a retired prince whose only responsibilities were eating and relaxing. The next morning, I was still shocked after seeing proof of the enormous account balance belonging to my mysterious wealthy fan. I muttered that perhaps I should stop being a poor celebrity and simply inherit my father's hot pot restaurant. Charlie looked at me with concern and told me that if working was too difficult, I should rest. I almost cried from emotion. I had no idea that he was actually worried I would inherit the restaurant and bankrupt the future business he already considered his own. Then disaster struck his rocking machine empire. The kindergarten installed several new slides, and children stopped paying for rides. Charlie became depressed. Before our next filming trip, he secretly packed several packets of broth concentrate into his bag. He planned to sell them to Ryan and recover his losses. We flew south to a coastal city called Seabridge. The warm southern sun hit me the moment I left the airport. I was still wrapped in a thick winter coat like a confused polar bear. The director watched me sneeze repeatedly and asked how I had managed to catch a cold in such warm weather. I honestly did not know. I quickly removed some of Charlie's layers. Steam seemed to rise from his head because he had been wrapped so tightly. I teased him and told him that he was almost fully cooked. The innocent child turned in circles trying to see the top of his own head, then realized I had tricked him and angrily turned away. Our hotel was one of Adrian's investments. While getting food, I accidentally ran into him. Adrian went rigid when I smiled and waved. I greeted him as President Carter and commented on the coincidence of meeting him in Seabridge. Before he could form a proper response, I hurried back to my room to eat with Charlie on the balcony. The sea breeze and clear blue sky activated every lazy instinct in my body. I stretched out on a rocking chair under a light blanket and decided that one day I needed a house by the ocean. Spending every winter there would be perfect. Charlie immediately reminded me that coastal houses were expensive. I shamelessly encouraged him. "Work hard, Charlie. I am depending on you. One day, remember to buy your old dad a large villa by the sea." This only strengthened his determination to become rich enough to support his lazy father. To avoid tourist prices, I suggested that we collect seashells instead of buying souvenirs. I also told Charlie about the painful time I had paid 380 yuan for a scarf that was apparently worth only 9. Charlie became furious on my behalf and called the seller a dishonest merchant. While carrying shells back to the hotel, Charlie ran into Adrian and dropped them everywhere. He stared at the broken shells, sorted the damaged pieces, and demanded compensation. Adrian refused to simply hand over money. Instead, he ordered his assistant, Marcus Lin, to collect replacement shells with Charlie. So Charlie marched down the beach with a man in a black suit following behind him and picking up shells. Meanwhile, I ran into Noah Reed and another guest who had collected crabs for the mission. I suggested that since there were 3 of us, we could simply take 1 crab each and avoid complicated division. The other man stared at me because I had somehow made stealing part of his mission reward sound completely reasonable. The real conflict happened when Charlie was resting on a beach chair. A manager named Victor Huang appeared in floral shorts and insulted him for looking poor. I walked over slowly and told the man that I was Charlie's father. Then I asked why a grown adult was standing there barking at a child. Victor started shouting even more aggressively. I calmly turned toward the cameraman and let the live stream continue for millions of viewers. I told Victor that I was giving him a free opportunity to trend online and that he should understand how fiercely the fans of a popular celebrity could fight. The man finally began to look afraid. Then Adrian arrived. Charlie immediately reported everything. He told Adrian that Victor had insulted both him and his father for being poor. Adrian's face became cold. He ended all cooperation with Victor's company on the spot. Victor turned pale and was forced to apologize. I looked at Charlie and asked whether he forgave him. Charlie gave a simple answer. No. I was both proud and amused. After security removed Victor, I sat beneath a beach umbrella and drank orange juice with Adrian. Adrian had also helped us complete the crab-gathering mission. I told Charlie that President Carter had been very kind and suggested giving him a thank you gift. Charlie firmly refused. The two of us then stretched out to enjoy the sunset, completely ignoring Ryan when he arrived carrying an overflowing bucket of crabs and clearly hoping to show off. I lazily told him that he had done well. That single calm response made him even more furious. The sunset over Seabridge was beautiful, but I had spent so much of the afternoon lying around that my body had somehow become tired from resting. The director and host had to whisper that filming had started before I finally sat up. Charlie also woke from a dream in which he had become a great businessman. He walked over to submit our mission result, which consisted of a single crab tied with far too much string. Ryan was proudly showing off an entire bucket of crabs. I noticed that one of his crabs had climbed out and fallen into our bucket. I said nothing. Ryan ended up losing first place by exactly one crab. His scream echoed across the beach. He shouted that he would fight me for his stolen victory. I clicked my tongue and observed that life was unpredictable, then escaped with Charlie before Ryan could recover. Back in the room, Charlie happily counted the money he had earned from Ryan and hid it inside the inner pocket of my thick winter coat. He knew there was no chance I would wear that coat in the southern heat. The most dangerous place was the safest place, at least according to his small criminal mind. I was exhausted, so I asked Adrian whether he could help bathe Charlie. Adrian misunderstood. His face immediately turned red, and he stammered that it would not be appropriate because we had only met a few times and things were moving far too quickly. I stared at him until he finally realized that I meant Charlie. His expression became unreadable. Then he picked Charlie up and carried him toward the bathroom. A war between one adult and one child began behind the door. By the time it ended, Charlie had mentally placed Adrian's name on the first page of his revenge list. To thank Adrian, I invited him to dinner the next evening. He agreed so quickly that it was obvious he had been hoping for another invitation. The next morning, the program's new mission required everyone to learn a skill connected to the ocean. The other children enthusiastically approached the training pool. Charlie stayed far away because he was afraid of water. He announced that he would not swim. Then he noticed a hotel employee receiving a tip. His eyes immediately brightened. He asked why the customer had given the employee money. Someone explained that good service could earn tips. Charlie straightened his back and announced that he wanted to become a server. Adrian happened to be nearby. He calmly said that if Charlie wanted to work in service, it could be arranged. The next morning, Charlie began his new career. The hotel had no uniform small enough for him, so he wore a spare children's suit. He sucked in his round belly and struggled to fasten the buttons. Adrian could not resist teasing him for being chubby. Charlie immediately defended himself by saying that his dad called it cute. He confidently requested a salary of 1,000 yuan. Adrian told him to keep dreaming. In the end, Charlie carried napkins for guests and worked without a salary, relying on tips instead. His serious little face and round body made him extremely popular. Several muscular men and stylish women gave him money simply because they found him adorable. One woman even paid 50 yuan to ask whether I was single. Charlie firmly told her no. When he returned, Adrian tried to use hotel rules to reduce his earnings because he had taken something from a guest table without permission. Charlie immediately pushed the item into Adrian's hand and claimed that Adrian had used it. Adrian was speechless. Then Charlie charged him 300 yuan for information about what the women had asked concerning me. The moment Adrian learned that women were asking about my relationship status, he hurried off to find me. He arrived just as one woman was openly flirting with me. I wanted to end the situation quickly, so I gave her a direct answer. I told her that I could not accept her invitation because I liked men. Adrian stopped moving. His expression was so stunned that I nearly laughed. I asked whether he had a problem with gay people. He looked completely confused and asked what that even meant. The blank expression on the face of such a powerful businessman was so funny that I had to look away. I reminded him that I would see him at dinner. That afternoon, the other guests worked hard learning to swim and surf. I discovered a much better ocean skill, fishing. I rented a fishing rod, wore sunglasses, wrapped myself in a blanket, and lay back beneath the afternoon sun. The director nearly lost his mind. He demanded to know what I was doing. I calmly explained that I was learning sea fishing. Charlie was equally shameless. Instead of swimming, he completed his shift as a beach server. When the director asked what ocean skill he had learned, Charlie held up his beach service name tag and pointed out that the word beach was clearly part of the job. Then he asked what the first place prize would be. After a full day of work, Charlie actually won first place among the children because beach service technically counted as a sea-related skill. He proudly showed everyone the 58 yuan he had earned in tips. The director looked exhausted but still gave him a medal. Charlie's proud ending was ruined when one button on his tiny suit finally flew off because his round stomach had been fighting it all day. I carried him back to the room and tried to sew the button on. My sewing skills were as bad as my cooking, so I eventually gave up. That evening, I brought Charlie to dinner with Adrian. Charlie still disliked Adrian after their earlier battles. But I reminded him that Adrian had helped us many times and that we should be grateful instead of petty. Adrian arrived looking younger and more relaxed than usual. When I mentioned that he and Charlie had similar tastes because both liked sweet and sour food, Adrian seemed unexpectedly pleased. The peace lasted only a few minutes. Charlie had already eaten too much but secretly kept a spoon because he wanted more. Adrian immediately exposed him. I confiscated the spoon from my small criminal. After dinner, I mentioned that it was unfortunate we had to leave the next day. Adrian quietly used his money and influence to extend the hotel stay for the entire production team by 3 days. The next morning, the director announced that an investor had given everyone 3 extra days free of charge. Charlie and I celebrated by sleeping late. We went downstairs for seafood porridge and found Ryan panicking because his beauty routine was not working as expected. When we left the restaurant, Adrian was preparing to go to work. He had returned to his usual black suit and rimless glasses. The moment he saw me, his cold expression softened. He wished me good morning. I told him to remember breakfast and suggested eating porridge. Adrian immediately changed his schedule and told his assistant that they would eat breakfast first. Charlie, already full, carried a bucket to the beach, found a comfortable place, drank coconut water, and relaxed in the breeze like another salted fish. After filming officially ended, we enjoyed the unexpected extra vacation days. One afternoon, I drove Charlie toward a shopping street on my tiny electric scooter. I confidently warned him to hold on because I was about to increase speed. An elderly man walking beside us passed the scooter without effort. Charlie stared ahead in silence. At the shopping street, I discovered an unexpected stack of money inside my winter coat pocket. I stared at it in wonder. Money had apparently fallen from heaven. I happily spent part of it buying 10 cups of milk tea so I could collect promotional souvenirs. Charlie stood beside me looking as if lightning had struck him. The money was his hidden savings. Back in the room, he desperately searched the coat and discovered that half the money was still hidden in the other pocket. His mood rose from the deepest pit to the highest sky within seconds. That evening, Adrian was busy. I asked Ryan to help bathe Charlie instead. Ryan had recently become obsessed with the fact that my skin looked better than his. Before leaving them, I deliberately told Charlie to remember using the special cream I had brought because it was very good. Ryan immediately took the bait. The moment I left, He secretly scooped some of Charlie's coconut-scented children's moisturizer into his makeup container. He looked delighted, convinced he had stolen some rare, unlabeled beauty treatment. Charlie sat in the bathtub and watched him with extreme suspicion. From Charlie's perspective, Ryan had just stolen cheap children's cream and was probably trying to recover the money he had previously lost in their business deals. After the bath, I distributed the excess milk tea to other guests. I warned Charlie very clearly that he was not allowed to charge anyone. He waddled down the hall and gave a cup to Noah Reed. Noah was so touched that he nearly cried, convinced that I had always remembered him as a true friend. At the end of the hallway, Charlie met Adrian returning from a meeting. Adrian saw the milk tea and teased Charlie, saying it was late and that someone with such a round stomach should probably stop drinking sweet things. Charlie became furious and rammed his head directly into Adrian's leg. I arrived in time to stop another war and handed Adrian a cup of milk tea. Adrian instantly became careful and polite, accepting it with both hands as if I had given him treasure. Charlie still wanted revenge. He looked at Adrian's stomach and calmly called him fat. Adrian ignored the insult and treasured the milk tea I had given him. That night he even photographed it and posted the picture online, creating another wave of fan speculation. The next morning, Charlie noticed that a large amount of his moisturizer was missing. He marched down the hall with the container to find the thief. Ryan appeared with suspiciously smooth skin. Charlie immediately understood. Ryan panicked and tried to silence him, insisting that he had only used a little and that Charlie should not be so stingy. Charlie charged him 100 yuan as a licensing fee. Adrian eventually appeared and coldly ordered Charlie back to our room before the hallway became even more chaotic. That afternoon, Charlie and I went to the airport to return home. The weather in our city had become cold, so we wore scarves, masks, and long padded coats. We looked like two moving black sesame rice balls. Near baggage claim, a young live streamer stood beside me complaining that he could not find Ethan Shaw anywhere. He joked that Ethan must know how to become invisible. Then he kindly helped me lift my suitcase and criticized my lack of strength, telling me that a grown man who could barely carry luggage should exercise. I silently smiled beneath my mask and enjoyed being invisible in the middle of a crowd. When my father's truck arrived, the live streamer stopped me and asked me to greet his viewers before leaving. I leaned toward his camera and used my normal gentle voice. I introduced myself as Ethan Shaw. Then I walked away while the young man turned to stone behind me. Inside the truck, my father talked about preparing a large meal and handling the legal paperwork to add Charlie to our household registration. I was so sleepy that I only heard the part about food and asked whether the hot pot was ready yet. Charlie sighed at me. He was already planning to install more coin-operated machines in his grandfather's restaurant after inheriting it one day. As soon as we returned to the city, my lazy stomach demanded hot pot. My father happily drove us to his restaurant. Charlie immediately ran to the rocking machine to check revenue. He nearly cried when he found only 2 coins inside. I could not resist teasing him about the terrible state of his business. Charlie turned red, marched inside, and ignored the entire world. After dinner, I saw how busy the restaurant was and helped my father at the register. Charlie put on a tiny apron and carried free fruit to customers. He did not consider it hard work because he had already decided he would inherit the restaurant one day. 2 young women at the counter recognized me as fans. I smiled and gave them a small extra gift as thanks for their support. My father became so excited by my growing popularity that he announced a 20% discount for everyone that day, along with free fruit. Charlie stood nearby looking physically pained. At this rate, his future restaurant would go bankrupt before he could inherit it. Before leaving, I told Charlie to check the machine cash box again. This time, coins spilled out until they filled both his pockets. Charlie stared at me. I smiled and told him to stop standing there and pick up his money. In reality, I had secretly exchanged some cash for coins and placed them inside because I wanted him to be happy. My father almost exposed me. I immediately pretended to feel dizzy and announced that we needed to go home. That night, Charlie counted the coins and carefully wrote in his diary. He recorded that his dad was a little foolish and believed Charlie did not know about the secret coins. Since Charlie was smart enough to notice, he decided he would still give his dad 40% of the profits. The next morning, I lay across the sofa and ordered Charlie to bring me water because I intended to remain horizontal all day. Charlie looked at me and silently decided to reduce my future share for laziness. Eventually, I forced myself up and took him back to school. His teacher reminded me that midterm exams were approaching. I nodded while quietly panicking because I had no idea whether Charlie knew enough for the test. Outside the teacher's office, I watched his tiny body walking ahead and told him not to feel pressured. I explained that he should simply do his best. Charlie looked up at me and asked what a test was. I explained that it measured what he had learned. He remained uninterested until I mentioned that poor scores might require a tutor costing several hundred yuan per hour. His eyes widened. He immediately became determined to avoid wasting money on tutoring. That night, my father was so emotional about Charlie's sudden dedication to studying that he nearly cried. He declared that the ancestors of the Shaw family must finally be proud. Charlie remained calm and patted his own stomach, telling us not to panic because the exam was a small matter. The next morning, I brought him to school with a set of lucky stationery and repeatedly told him it would bring good fortune. Charlie entered the math exam and finished almost immediately. Then he wandered around the schoolyard and found the principal walking with a thermos. Charlie approached with shining eyes and suggested charging children money to use the slides and swings, offering the principal half of the profits. The principal nearly choked on his drink. He asked whether Charlie believed he was stupid. Then he carried Charlie back to class and made him complete the backup exam paper as punishment for having too much free time. Inside the classroom, Oliver saw that Charlie had completed 2 papers and begged for help with the final problem. Charlie refused. Oliver grabbed one of Charlie's completed papers, changed the name, and turned it in as his own. Charlie looked at him quietly and asked whether his father was strict. When Oliver admitted that his father often punished him, Charlie seemed almost sympathetic. In his mind, Oliver had already chosen his own tragic ending. After school, the results appeared in the class group. Charlie's name stood at the top. My father and I celebrated loudly. Charlie calmly drank warm milk like a small executive and reminded us that I had promised pork rib soup as a reward. My father became so proud that he wanted to print the score sheet and display it at home. I looked at the perfect score and proudly decided that my lucky stationery had worked. Then the teacher called. She explained that Charlie and Oliver had somehow submitted exchanged test papers. I could only smile awkwardly and say that I understood. The next morning, Oliver arrived at school with swollen eyes and announced that he was running away from home. After class, the round little boy grabbed Charlie's hand and asked whether he could stay at our house. I agreed to feed him dinner. Charlie became visibly distressed because Oliver had already eaten a sausage and would now consume our food as well. Looking at the 2 children, I felt lucky that Charlie was usually responsible. If he were lazy at school and constantly running away like Oliver, my heart might truly stop. That evening, after Oliver's mother arrived and took him home for what looked like a serious educational storm, I unexpectedly felt inspired to write music. I finished a song, walked into the living room exhausted, took Charlie's bottle of milk, and drank all of it. I commented that it was slightly too sweet and asked for less sugar next time. Charlie stared at his shameless father without words. The next morning, while walking through the cold toward school, I had another idea. I suggested that Charlie should get a driver's license so he could drive his week-old father around in the future. Charlie seriously agreed. He began planning driving lessons in class. His teacher destroyed the dream by explaining that children were not allowed to drive and that he needed to be 18 before taking a license test. While still disappointed about driving, Charlie was called into the office to try an advanced mathematics Olympiad paper. His natural ability shocked the teachers. He solved the difficult questions and then calmly said that writing out all the solution steps was unnecessary because it wasted time. That afternoon, I picked him up earlier than usual. On the way home, I decided that a child with too much free time needed a new project. I announced that Charlie would enter a mathematics Olympiad. I told him that he was still young and needed to see more of the world. Charlie looked at me with clear eyes. He knew perfectly well that I mainly wanted to keep him busy so I could lie around in peace. Still, he sighed with the patience of an adult and agreed because I was his dad and apparently someone had to indulge me. Once the decision was made, I started searching for a professional mathematics teacher. Before I could arrange anything, the reality show announced another filming schedule. A deputy director mentioned that later episodes might be filmed in a northern ice city. I started shivering just from the description and immediately refused. A trip like that would probably kill me. We eventually reached a compromise. The next episode would be filmed in the suburbs, while later cameras could follow Charlie studying for the Olympiad as extra material. That night, the two of us were curled beneath a blanket when Charlie suddenly asked why I could not teach him if I was an adult. The question struck me directly in the heart. I explained that adults also had things they did not know. Charlie looked thoughtful and slightly disappointed. Apparently growing up did not automatically make a person impressive. Looking at his tiny, serious face, I silently decided that our household would simply have to depend on him. Early the next morning, at the villa used for filming, we ran into Adrian jogging. He wore light sports clothes despite the cold. I admired his resistance to weather and asked whether he was not freezing. Adrian looked at me with an unusually gentle expression. Charlie immediately ruined the atmosphere. When Adrian politely asked whether his presence disturbed filming, Charlie said yes. I hurried to exchange contact information with Adrian to smooth things over, then dragged Charlie into the villa. Inside, we ran into Ryan Blake again, a man whose mouth seemed designed specifically for causing trouble. Ryan would not stop bragging about an expensive durian he had brought, so I picked up an apple from the table and pushed it into his mouth. I told him to be quiet and warned that if he said one more word, I might use the durian shell next. At last, my ears were peaceful enough for me to hear the rules of the next mission. Unfortunately, those rules turned all the adults into villains. Each child would protect an egg. The adults had to steal the eggs. Any adult who failed would receive a terrible punishment. The men would wear women's clothing, while the women would dress as clowns. I had no intention of wearing a dress, so for once I became motivated. I drew Evan as my target. Ryan drew Charlie. Ryan hurried away, excited to manipulate my child. Charlie had already hidden his real egg in a drawer. Ryan approached him and tried to act generous. He suggested forgetting their old disputes and not allowing money to damage the bond between uncle and child. He tried playing ball, inviting Charlie for a walk, and offering all kinds of entertainment. Charlie simply lay in the sunlight and informed him that he was not like ordinary children. When Charlie asked for snacks, Ryan thought he had finally found the child's weakness. He hurried to bring food. While I was peacefully completing my own mission, Charlie opened what could only be described as an egg bank. He lay on a lounge chair eating the snacks Ryan had brought and calmly reminded Ryan that Ryan already knew what Charlie liked most. Ryan understood. He secretly gathered 1,000 yuan in cash and offered to buy Charlie's egg. Charlie accepted the money and gave him an egg, but with suspicious honesty he warned that he could not guarantee it was real. He even told Ryan that there was still time to return it. Ryan was afraid Charlie would change his mind, so he hugged the fragrant salted egg like treasure and refused to return it. When I arrived to call Charlie for food, I found Ryan looking extremely proud. I smiled gently and held up the real mission egg that I had obtained from Evan. I explained that Evan had traded it to me for a salted egg. Ryan stared at the egg in his hands. Then his scream filled the courtyard. He accused Charlie of selling fake goods. Charlie calmly announced that the return period had already ended. Ryan was not Charlie's only customer. When Chloe and Katie worried that adults might steal their eggs, Charlie offered a storage service. For 20 to 30 yuan each, he promised to protect their eggs somewhere no adult would find them. He collected the eggs and led the children into the garden. Together they dug a hole beneath the 9th tree and buried everything. The other adults spent the afternoon offering candy to children and receiving oranges or tangerines in exchange. Charlie, director of the egg bank, rested comfortably in the sun. When the host announced that 6 children had successfully protected their eggs, everyone stared at Charlie. He slowly stood and waved to the line of children behind him. They marched into the garden and began digging. The sight of several children with their backs in the air, digging beneath a nearly bare tree, made the defeated adults look miserable. I felt all their resentful eyes turn toward me. Sweat appeared on my forehead. I grabbed Charlie's messy hair and informed him that acting cute would not help. Once we got home, he would be turning over every yuan he had earned. Charlie looked deeply wronged because nobody respected the effort he had put into his business. The adults who failed had to accept their punishments. When I carried Charlie into the living room and saw them, I nearly fainted. 6 grown adults had transformed into terrifying combinations of dresses, clown costumes, makeup, and badly chosen accessories. Noah Reed looked especially shocking in a tight black dress over a heavily muscled body. Charlie opened his eyes, saw the scene, and immediately closed them again as if losing consciousness were the safest response. I grabbed the host and reminded him that my heart was weak. If my eyes were damaged by what I had seen, the program would be responsible. Nobody rescued me. Several children started crying. Chloe became so frightened that she offered to exchange her own parent for me. She told Charlie that Charlie could take her mother, while she would take Ethan Shaw as her dad. Charlie immediately woke from his fake faint. He wrapped both arms around me and declared that I was his dad and could not be traded. In the final vote for the most beautiful costume, Noah unexpectedly won. Charlie's reason was simple. If the children did not vote for Noah, they were afraid he might eat them. After that traumatic filming session, I needed to visit a mathematics training center to ask about the Olympiad. Adrian happened to be going in the same direction and offered us a ride. Inside his expensive car, Charlie studied the luxurious seat and asked whether it cost much. Adrian casually said it was not very expensive. Charlie immediately took out the 150 yuan he had just earned and offered to buy the seat. Adrian went silent. Then he tapped Charlie's head and explained that Charlie would need to add several zeros before any negotiation could begin. Charlie turned away and muttered that Adrian was a dishonest merchant. At the training center, a teacher made an embarrassing mistake. She assumed Adrian and I were a couple. She explained that only one of the 2 fathers needed to remain with Charlie. My face became hot and I quickly denied the relationship. Adrian said nothing about correcting her. Instead, he immediately volunteered to stay and collect Charlie's materials, giving himself an excuse not to leave. Charlie entered the trial class with complete seriousness. His motivation was not love of mathematics. The class cost money, so he intended to learn every possible thing from it. When class ended, I saw Adrian still waiting outside even though he had claimed he needed to go somewhere for work. I teased him about it. Adrian had no answer. He stood in the afternoon sunlight and watched while Charlie and I climbed into my father's car. Before we left, he stepped forward and handed me the small gift bag that the center had prepared for Charlie. I accepted it and thanked him. Inside the car, Charlie pressed his face against the window until his round cheek flattened against the glass. He watched Adrian until the man disappeared from view. I tapped Charlie's head and asked why he was staring so seriously. Charlie pulled his face away from the glass with a soft sound and looked thoughtful. He had apparently decided that the dishonest businessman named Carter had behaved very strangely that day. He kept his conclusion to himself because he did not want his timid father to worry. The next morning, Charlie woke with a noticeably flatter stomach because he had fallen asleep before dinner. I quickly brought breakfast and told him to eat. He worked hard to restore the round shape of his belly. At school, the other children played while Charlie sat quietly solving Olympiad problems. Oliver looked at the page, saw the dense numbers, and backed away in horror. Charlie finished another problem and explained that these Olympiad lessons were expensive. His business mind calculated that each problem was worth about 10 yuan. The rumor spread through the classroom. A brave boy named Benny Ross brought money and asked to buy access to one problem. Charlie considered himself an ethical merchant. Since 2 people would be looking at the same problem, he charged Benny only 5 yuan instead of 10. Benny looked at the question and burst into tears because it was too difficult. Charlie immediately put the payment into his bag under the principle that sold goods were not refundable. He soon decided that selling individual problems was inefficient. He upgraded to a monthly VIP service. He wrote VIP in large letters on a piece of paper and offered one classmate a special subscription for 150 yuan. Everyone else would have to pay 200. Within 2 days, he had earned 250 yuan. He walked around hiding a smile behind his hand, dreaming of the day the entire kindergarten would pay him monthly membership fees. One night, heavy rain made the air painfully cold. Charlie was warm beneath the blanket like a small portable heater. I could not resist sliding my freezing hand against his neck. He jumped in shock and stared at me. I awkwardly admitted that my hands were cold. Charlie remained silent for a moment. Then he took my hand and placed it against his round stomach. From beneath the blanket, his sleepy voice told me that his belly was warm and that I could keep my hand there until it warmed up. Something inside my chest melted. The rain outside was cold, but the small body beside me felt warmer than anything I had known in a long time. I hugged him and asked how any child could possibly be this good. Charlie became embarrassed and told me that if I was finished warming my hands, he wanted to sleep. The next morning, my lazy nature took control again. I called his teacher and said that I was not feeling well, so Charlie needed to stay home and take care of me. The two of us slept until noon and ignored the outside world. Charlie still could not tolerate wasting money. Even on his day off, he used a tablet to study the advanced Olympiad course because first prize in the competition was worth 5,000 yuan. When I saw him staring at the screen, I worried that the material might be too difficult. He calmly said it was not. He was actually calculating how much each lesson cost so he could make sure to learn enough value from it. Our peaceful day was interrupted when someone moved into the apartment directly across from ours. I opened the door to see the new neighbor and froze. Adrian stood there holding bags of food. He calmly announced that he was my new neighbor and had brought a welcome gift. The food was suspiciously perfect. He had chosen the light tofu soup and braised ribs I liked most. I stared at him and asked whether he could read my mind. Adrian only smiled and told me to call him if I needed anything. That afternoon, the rain became so heavy that I could not find transportation to Charlie's extra class. I knocked on the door across the hall for help. Adrian immediately agreed to drive us even though he had clearly exhausted himself moving furniture all day. Charlie remained suspicious throughout the trip. He asked why Adrian had moved directly across from our apartment. Adrian responded that he did not need permission from a child to choose where he lived. At the training center, Charlie entered class and sold another monthly VIP package to a boy named Tyler for 150 yuan. Outside, Adrian heard several parents gossiping that he and I looked like a couple. He secretly seemed pleased. He even video called me and reminded me to dry my hair properly because the weather was cold. When class ended, Adrian accidentally caught Charlie exchanging answers for money. He asked whether Charlie was allowing other children to copy his work. Charlie immediately became nervous. He feared that Adrian would tell me. When they reached our apartment door, Charlie's entire voice changed. He sweetly called him Uncle Adrian. The sudden sweetness made Adrian pause. He quickly recovered and warned Charlie not to cause trouble that would make me worry. Charlie put on the innocent face of a child who had never committed a business crime in his life. Then he quietly grabbed Adrian's sleeve and negotiated for secrecy. When they entered our apartment, I was waiting under a blanket. Adrian's expression softened immediately. During dinner, he even flirted shamelessly by insisting that he liked burnt eggs after I apologized for ruining the dish. Charlie heard that and placed the blackest piece of egg into Adrian's bowl. If Adrian liked burnt food, Charlie believed he should have the best piece. I lightly scolded Charlie. Adrian looked far too pleased with his small victory. Before leaving, he gave Charlie one last warning to behave properly. Charlie was furious. The next morning, I forced myself out into the light rain and walked Charlie to school. He wore a yellow raincoat and looked like a round duck. Before entering the classroom, he carefully wiped every drop of water from his clothes. At kindergarten, he was the only child who solved a difficult bonus question. He carried his thermos through the hallway afterward and ran into the principal. Charlie immediately accused the principal of copying his style because they both carried thermoses. By the end of the school day, I had developed a fever. Adrian went to pick Charlie up for me. On the way home, Charlie slipped and fell directly into a muddy puddle. Instead of helping immediately, Adrian laughed. Then he claimed that his hand had slipped when he had tried to catch him. Charlie became furious and promised to tell his dad everything. When they arrived home, I saw the small muddy figure and laughed so hard that I nearly fell to the floor. Charlie became genuinely angry with me. He walked inside and refused to look at me. After thanking Adrian and sending him home, I tried to repair the situation with 2 bottles of milk. It was not enough. Only after I sincerely apologized and admitted that the fever had made me tired did Charlie's heart soften. He asked whether I felt better. Then he pushed me toward the bed, tucked the blanket around me, and touched my forehead like a small adult. He decided that I was not too hot and told me that sleeping would help. After so many exhausting filming days, I wanted nothing more than to stay home with Charlie. Adrian, however, seemed unable to stay away. He regularly appeared with food, fruit, medicine, or other supplies. I looked at the expensive items accumulating in my apartment and joked that my home was turning into one of his storage rooms. Adrian remained calm. He said that everything was useful for the health of me and Charlie, and that I did not need to be polite with him. I wondered whether this powerful executive was supporting his favorite celebrity or attempting to financially adopt my entire family. Charlie was harder to impress. He looked at the expensive toys Adrian brought, then studied me with the thoughtful expression of an elderly accountant. Later, when we were alone, he pulled my sleeve and asked whether Adrian was a bad person or a good person. I told him that Adrian was good and had helped us many times. Charlie nodded. Then the business light appeared in his eyes. He asked whether that meant he should accept money if Adrian offered it. I immediately warned him not to take money casually from strangers. Charlie made a dismissive sound. Adrian was hardly a stranger anymore. According to Charlie, he was rapidly becoming the family cash machine. The situation became even more awkward when I accidentally discovered that Adrian was the mysterious wealthy viewer who had been sending enormous gifts during my live streams. I almost dropped my phone. I asked whether he was really that account. For the first time, Adrian looked truly embarrassed. His ears turned red even while he forced his voice to remain serious. He claimed that he had only wanted to support me because I worked hard. I did not know whether to laugh or cry. It felt as if I suddenly owed him a fortune. Charlie immediately recognized an opportunity. He approached Adrian with a handwritten fee chart and explained that if Adrian wanted to be his dad's friend, he would need to pay a membership fee. Adrian laughed instead of becoming angry. He rubbed Charlie's hair and told him to name his price. One morning, I woke wearing matching shark pajamas with Charlie and found a note from Adrian reminding me to eat breakfast and take my medicine. The small act of care made me unexpectedly warm. Before I could enjoy the feeling for long, the production crew arrived to install permanent cameras in our apartment. I had not even changed clothes and had to greet them in the oversized shark pajamas. Then the elevator opened. Charlie and Adrian stepped out together, wearing almost identical cold expressions. A young staff member named Owen stared at them, then asked whether I had finally found Charlie's real father. I nearly choked. I quickly explained that Adrian was only the new neighbor across the hall. Even while I denied it, Charlie stood on his toes and pressed a soft hand to my forehead. He confirmed that my fever had gone but told me the hallway was cold and that I should go back inside. Looking at Charlie and Adrian together, I felt a strange movement in my heart. After the staff left, Charlie inspected the new camera. He poked it and asked whether it could speak. The device moved slightly but obviously gave no answer. Charlie decided that it was afraid people would discover it was mute, so it pretended to understand conversation. I laughed until my eyes watered and told him to stop bullying the poor machine. He climbed down, ate a piece of orange, and concluded that the camera was a little stupid, similar to some children in his Olympiad class. When Charlie admitted that he had once insulted a classmate for having no brain, I told him he needed to be more patient with other people. Looking into his dark eyes, I suddenly asked about his family name. Charlie looked hopeful. He asked whether he was allowed to change it and told me that he wanted to be Charlie Shaw. I realized that he had never liked the Carter surname. As he spoke, I learned more about his childhood. His late mother had left behind bitter recordings telling him not to bother her. Even the name Charlie had essentially been chosen by the child himself when he was too young to understand what a name meant. My heart hurt for him. I told him that Charlie Shaw sounded much better. To celebrate, I promised hot pot that evening. Charlie immediately became excited. At that exact moment, Adrian video called. Without hesitation, I asked him to bring ingredients for our hot pot. When Adrian arrived carrying food through the cold evening air, I greeted him warmly and told him to come inside before he froze. Charlie had been waiting happily for dinner. The moment he saw Adrian's tall figure behind me, his smile disappeared and his entire face became guarded. Dinner turned into a quiet battle between the two of them. I explained that Adrian had gone to my father's restaurant to buy the ingredients because I did not trust random shops. Charlie looked at Adrian with the seriousness of a purchasing manager and asked whether he had paid. Adrian confirmed that he had. Only then did Charlie allow him to join the meal. He still pointed toward the farthest seat from the hot pot and ordered Adrian to sit there. I gave the first beef ball to Charlie and announced that it belonged to the most obedient and adorable child in the house. Then I gave the second one to Adrian and thanked him for everything he had done for us. The secret war continued. Whenever Adrian reached for a good piece of meat, Charlie tried to take it first. Adrian retaliated by reminding me that Charlie's stomach was already full, which made me take Charlie's bowl away. Charlie rushed to me and complained that Adrian was bullying a child. I laughed and told President Carter that I had never expected him to become this childish. Adrian tilted his head and asked whether he really was. For one strange second, that confused expression made my heart skip. I quickly looked away just as my phone rang. My father was video calling. Adrian accidentally appeared in the frame and politely introduced himself. He apologized for not recognizing my father earlier when they had crossed paths at the restaurant. My father stared at him for a long moment. Then he asked how long Adrian had known his son. The air became very still. After the interrogation ended, my father made another comment that stayed in my mind. He said that Charlie and Adrian looked far too similar. That night, while I put Charlie to sleep, Adrian remained restless in the apartment across the hall. He searched online for reasons strangers might repeatedly be mistaken for father and son. Then he called his assistant. He ordered a quiet investigation into everything that had happened after his older sister left the Carter family. He demanded complete details and warned the assistant not to let his grandmother discover the search. Memories of the cold Carter family and his sister's death returned, leaving Adrian with a deep headache and a growing suspicion he was afraid to name. Late that night, Adrian stood alone on his balcony, lost in thoughts he could not settle. Then he noticed a small light moving from the balcony next door. I was standing there with the flashlight on my phone pointed toward him. I waved it twice and told him he was still awake far too late and that he needed to go to sleep. The darkness in his expression disappeared almost immediately. He smiled and promised that he would sleep at once. The next morning, golden sunlight spilled across the room. Charlie had already washed his face, brushed his teeth, and carefully straightened everything on our table until every edge lined up perfectly. I woke up, stared at the excessive neatness, and deliberately pushed one corner of the tablecloth slightly out of place. It looked much more natural that way. When I walked into the living room, I heard Charlie scolding Adrian at the door. He told Adrian to keep his voice down because his dad was still sleeping, and warned him not to spill breakfast. Adrian stepped inside and looked at me with unusual softness. He asked if I was awake. Charlie immediately ran over to report that Adrian had been bullying a child. I could only smile and mediate another ridiculous dispute between them, this time about who had paid for breakfast. Once we sat down, Charlie suddenly looked at Adrian with the seriousness of a board chairman. He asked whether Adrian's company was having problems. Then he announced that he could help, but Adrian would have to give him 10% of the company. Adrian nearly choked on his food. He called Charlie heartless, but privately he had to admit that the child possessed a frightening instinct for business. When the reality show crew arrived to film Charlie's Olympiad lesson, the field director nearly turned to stone after seeing Adrian calmly eating breakfast in my apartment. I quickly explained that Adrian Carter was only the neighbor who lived across the hall. No one looked convinced. In the underground garage, Charlie stopped in front of Adrian's tall sports car and lifted both short arms into the air. He was clearly waiting to be picked up. Adrian sighed, grabbed him under the arms, and awkwardly lifted him into the seat. Charlie's head bumped lightly against the roof. Adrian immediately apologized and admitted that he had never carried a child before. Charlie rubbed his head and sighed like an exhausted old investor. Apparently those company shares were not going to be easy to earn. At the training center, Charlie somehow persuaded the cameraman to film the entire class so every child could appear on television. He arranged people, assigned positions, and spoke with such cold authority that Adrian stood in the hallway with an increasingly complicated expression. The little boy had copied Adrian's executive manner far too well. Adrian stepped away and called his assistant. He asked whether the investigation had been completed. He wanted every detail about what had happened to his older sister after she left the Carter family. On the drive home, the answer finally arrived. Charlie was blood of the Carter family. Adrian remained silent for a long time. Then he asked Charlie whether he had ever wondered if he still had relatives from his mother's side. Charlie looked out the window and said there probably were some. Then he asked what that had to do with him. He already had his dad and his grandpa, and that was enough. The answer left Adrian both moved and strangely jealous of the place I held in Charlie's heart. He quietly said that Charlie was luckier than he was. Charlie noticed the sadness in his face and tried to comfort him in the most Charlie way possible. He told Adrian not to be sad, because being unlucky seemed completely normal for him. Adrian stared at him in disbelief and ordered him to stop talking. A few minutes later, Charlie noticed that the car was not heading home. He became alert immediately and asked whether Adrian planned to drive somewhere remote and abandon him. Adrian answered coldly that Charlie had asked for shares, so they were going to the company to sign the papers. That morning, Adrian drove Charlie directly to the headquarters of Carter Group. The moment they entered the lobby, employees froze. A miniature version of President Carter had suddenly appeared beside their boss. Internal group chats exploded with rumors that a young heir had arrived. Charlie ignored every curious stare. He marched around Adrian's office with his hands behind his back, pointing at things like a tiny executive inspecting a new acquisition. He decided that Adrian's desk needed a green plant because his dad said greenery was good for the eyes. Then he wanted a coat rack, a snack plate, and a place where he could sit and study. Adrian finally pressed a hand to his forehead and told Charlie to stop spinning around before he became dizzy. When a secretary entered to give a report, Charlie did not understand a single business term. That did not stop him from crossing his arms, nodding gravely, and telling the secretary to sit down. The poor woman looked between Charlie and Adrian, uncertain which President Carter she was supposed to obey. At lunchtime, Charlie decided to punish Adrian's wallet. He filled a tray with enough food for several people and insisted on buying a hot taro milk tea as well. He could not finish the meal. Adrian hated waste more than he hated disorder, so he ended up eating the leftovers himself. Charlie held the warm milk tea in both hands, looked at Adrian, and calmly told him to pay. At that moment, Adrian looked less like a powerful businessman and more like a mobile cash machine. Before they left, however, Adrian placed a transfer agreement in front of Charlie. He told Charlie that the shares of the amusement park were now his. It was a gift. Charlie's mouth fell open. He asked whether Adrian was really giving him all of them. Charlie did not know that this gift was the quiet compensation of an uncle who had only just discovered the nephew he had never known existed. Late that afternoon, the two returned home. Charlie immediately reached inside his coat and carefully pulled out the taro milk tea he had protected all the way back. It was still warm. He handed it to me and said he had brought it home for his dad. I was so touched that I pulled him into a tight hug. Adrian stood beside us and silently studied the scene as if he had just discovered a valuable new strategy. That night, while I tucked Charlie into bed, he whispered a huge secret into my ear. Adrian had given him all the amusement park shares. Charlie proudly announced that he could support his dad now. Every trace of sleep disappeared from my mind. I had a sudden feeling that Adrian already knew everything. Late that night, I stepped onto the balcony for some cold air and found him standing on his own balcony again. Our eyes met in the darkness. Adrian quietly said that he believed we were both worrying about the same thing. Then he told me not to be afraid. What I feared would not happen. He would help me. After that winter night, my trust in Adrian began to grow without me noticing. On Monday morning, I had to struggle to wake Charlie for school. He stumbled into the bathroom half asleep. Then he suddenly remembered that he was now a major shareholder in an amusement park. Foam still covered his mouth when a foolish smile appeared on his face. He announced that he would walk to school by himself today because a shareholder could not always be carried by his dad. At school, the principal told the class that their field trip might be canceled because the previous partner had withdrawn. Charlie immediately walked into the office. He told the principal to contact Carter Park and said that he would handle the matter. Then he copied Adrian's tone almost perfectly when he called the park manager and ordered him to prepare a proposal and send it over so Charlie could review the profit. The manager could only agree while privately wondering whether the young chairman even knew what an email was. That evening, my apartment turned into a boardroom. Adrian wore his glasses and seriously reviewed the proposal that had been sent to Charlie. He criticized the plan for being full of cheap tricks designed to fool children. Charlie immediately slapped the table in outrage. He demanded to know how that manager dared use tricks for children to fool him. Adrian gave him a dry look and reminded him that he was, in fact, a child. Despite the teasing, Adrian patiently taught Charlie how to open email, read a proposal, and correct the important sections. He marked line after line and told Charlie to study carefully because he would have to do it himself in the future. Charlie nodded with the solemn expression of a young chairman carrying the fate of an empire. Later, he came into my room to complain that being a boss was exhausting because his employees never listened properly. I bit back a laugh and patted the head of the tiny executive learning to manage an entertainment business before he could even write every word correctly. The day of the school trip finally arrived. I dressed Charlie in bright yellow, making him look like a round little chick. The moment we reached the amusement park, he clasped his hands behind his back and began inspecting the place. He studied the rows of children's rides and nodded with satisfaction. Business was apparently acceptable. I had to grab the back of his hood and pull him toward the class before he wandered away to audit the entire property. While we enjoyed the sunshine, the reality show crew was filming somewhere far colder. Online fans quickly noticed clips of Charlie leading a group of yellow-clad children through the park. People started asking why Ethan Shaw and his son had escaped the freezing chute to enjoy a private vacation. The truth was even stranger. A park manager soon arrived with official documents confirming the change in ownership. One staff member who had treated Charlie dismissively earlier stared at the papers, then stared at the round child in the yellow hat, and completely lost the ability to speak. Charlie calmly asked whether the man needed something from the major shareholder. The man could only shake his head and retreat in embarrassment. I found the scene so funny that I lifted my phone and recorded Charlie's tiny executive posture. I told him that he was doing so well that perhaps one day I should hand my father's hot pot restaurant over to him too. Charlie nodded immediately. He said he would open a hot pot restaurant inside the amusement park. Apparently, every asset in the family was already part of his expansion plan. After lunch, Charlie led me to the administrative building and stopped outside the office that still carried Adrian's name. I asked whether this was not President Carter's office. Charlie answered that it used to be. Now it belonged to him because Adrian no longer owned the park shares. I felt a little sorry for Adrian. His nephew had removed him from power with impressive efficiency. Adrian complained about it later, but he still arranged for a secretary to place a new sign on the office next door. The sign identified it as the office of Little President Carter. Charlie walked around proudly and requested one more thing. He wanted a soft sponge pillow just like the one at home. I clapped and told him that our Charlie had become a very important person. His small chest immediately lifted with pride. The field trip ended beneath a brilliant sunset. For Charlie, however, all happiness vanished when the teacher announced that everyone had to write a diary entry about the trip. The moment we got home, Adrian arrived carrying hot dinner. I reacted like a starving man seeing rescue. I asked how he had known we had not eaten yet and told him that his timing was perfect. Adrian looked at me with such gentle eyes that I briefly forgot Charlie was standing nearby. He said that he had to do something, otherwise he would never catch up to me. The direct flirtation made my ears burn. Charlie tilted his head suspiciously. He asked what catching up meant, and why Adrian needed to chase his dad. I immediately squeezed Charlie's cheeks together and turned his mouth into a tiny duck shape. Then I announced that it was time to eat and that nobody needed to ask any more questions. Throughout dinner, Charlie became extremely busy. Every time Adrian tried to serve me food, Charlie intercepted it. Every time Adrian poured me water, Charlie reached for the glass first. Every bit of attention from Adrian was blocked by a determined little gatekeeper. After I went to sleep, Adrian finally confronted him. He asked why Charlie had spent the entire day opposing him. Charlie looked at him with deep suspicion. Then he accused Adrian of wanting to become his new dad so he could steal the amusement park shares back. Adrian was completely speechless. He went out to the balcony for cold air and received a call from his powerful grandmother. She had learned about Charlie's adoption and wanted to intervene. Adrian tightened his hand around the phone. He told her not to interfere. Charlie was living well. He already had a family that truly loved him. The next morning, a wave of colder air moved through the city. Charlie and I wrapped ourselves in thick coats until we looked like two walking bundles of fabric. Adrian appeared at the door, naturally took Charlie's backpack, and offered to drive him to school. He said he was free that morning and the wind outside was strong, so I should avoid getting cold. I smiled and suggested that we all go together. At the kindergarten gate, the teacher greeted us brightly and asked whether both of Charlie's fathers had brought him to school that day. Charlie instantly exploded. He shouted that Adrian was not his father, then ran into the building as fast as his short legs could carry him. For the rest of the day, he sat in class sighing like a worried old man and buried himself in Olympiad problems to avoid thinking about Adrian taking over the position of dad. That evening, Adrian came over with steamed buns and soup. At some point, he casually repeated that he needed to make an effort if he wanted to catch up to me. My face heated again. Charlie became even more alarmed. He dug through his pocket, found 5 coins he had earned, and used them to buy a cotton candy for Adrian. Then he handed it over with great seriousness. He told Adrian to take the candy and find some other child to be a father to. Charlie already had a dad and did not need another one. Adrian almost laughed from frustration. Instead, he pulled out his phone and imposed strict discipline. Charlie had to stand beside the desk and record a complete recitation video before he could sleep. The child nearly cried from anger, but he could do nothing because I had already betrayed him by adding Adrian to the parent group chat. For more than 40 days, the teacher had been criticizing me for Charlie's behavior. I was more than happy to let Adrian share the burden. Misfortune immediately arrived. The teacher sent a message saying that Charlie's diary and Oliver's diary were 99% identical. Adrian looked at the 2 pages. Both children had replaced most of the difficult characters with circles. The vein at his temple began to pulse. He asked Charlie to explain what wonderful thing he had done this time. Then he lifted Charlie by the back of his coat and took him across the hall to his own apartment for discipline. Adrian informed him that he would have to visit the teacher's office the next day because of this mess. Therefore, Charlie could forget about sleeping beside his dad that night. He would stay there and reflect on his crimes. Charlie puffed up like an angry little fish and silently promised that when he became chairman one day, Adrian would be the first person he fired. The following morning, the teacher asked about Adrian's relationship to Charlie. Adrian looked at the child's messy hair and answered clearly. He was Charlie's uncle. The word uncle stunned Charlie. He entered class in a daze. Oliver, who had been crying because of the diary incident, leaned over and asked whether Charlie's uncle had hit him. Charlie could only stare in silence. After school, gray winter clouds covered the sky. Adrian waited outside with a black umbrella. Charlie slowly walked over, looked up at the tall man, and quietly asked whether he really was his uncle. If that was true, why had he never appeared before? Adrian released a soft breath. He said that he had only recently learned that he had a nephew. Charlie stepped backward in alarm. He immediately declared that no matter what happened, he would not leave with Adrian. He wanted to stay with his dad. Adrian looked directly into his eyes. He promised that no one would disturb Charlie's life. That promise finally calmed the child. Soon all of our attention shifted toward the upcoming mathematics Olympiad. On the morning of the exam, I prepared a special breakfast that represented a perfect score of 100. I arranged one long fried dough stick and 2 eggs on the plate. Charlie studied it for several seconds. Then he reminded me that the maximum score was 120. I froze. Adrian turned his face away to hide a laugh. I quickly rearranged 1 egg into the shape of the number 2 and announced that the breakfast now represented 120. If Charlie ate all of it, he would definitely receive a perfect score. The atmosphere outside the examination building was tense. Parents paced back and forth while children reviewed notes. Adrian noticed how nervous I was and nudged Charlie with his foot, signaling that he should comfort his dad. Charlie looked down first and carefully brushed away the dust Adrian had put on his pants. Then he patted my thigh and told me not to worry because he was the one taking the exam. I watched his small back disappear through the entrance under the winter sunlight, and warmth quietly filled my chest. While we waited, my father finally had a direct confrontation with Adrian. He held a bottle of cold water like a police interrogator and asked Adrian Carter what kind of business his company operated. Adrian stood straight and answered respectfully that he worked in international trade and technology. My father began moving toward questions about the Carter family past. I immediately interrupted and told him that old matters did not need to be discussed. Adrian looked at me with such obvious tenderness that my father quickly moved between us and blocked his line of sight. Inside the examination room, Charlie finished early. With nothing better to do, he used the remaining paper to sketch a plan for eventually taking over his uncle's company. Adrian was his biological uncle now. In Charlie's opinion, that meant the company would probably become his someday anyway. There was no reason to waste energy collecting shares one by one. When he left the room, he met Evan, who was crying because he had not finished the exam. Charlie used a tissue to wipe his friend's face and told him that his dad and grandpa were waiting outside. Evan asked through tears whether Charlie had completed every problem. Charlie calmly said that he had, and that he knew how to solve all of them. The answer made Evan cry even harder. Outside, the gate was filled with children in tears because the exam had been difficult. My father was already complaining that the questions were cruel and that the teachers had no mercy. Then Charlie walked out looking completely relaxed and said the exam had not been difficult at all. My father immediately changed his opinion and declared that the exam was clearly sophisticated and well-designed. Among the crowd, I saw Evan still crying, while Ryan performed his caring father routine in front of a camera. I did not hesitate. I pushed the sniffling child toward Ryan and told him to wipe Evan's nose because the lighting in that spot was excellent. Ryan smiled through clenched teeth for the camera. I suppressed my laughter and left with Charlie and my father for hot pot. Adrian remained behind for a moment, watching us with an expression that even my father could no longer ignore. During dinner, my father unexpectedly developed sympathy for the lovesick businessman. He told me that if I truly did not like Adrian, I needed to say so clearly instead of letting the man continue hoping. When I stepped outside beneath the sunset, Adrian was still waiting patiently. Something inside me softened. Back at home, Adrian carried the sleeping Charlie into the bedroom. Then he returned and handed me a warm cup of honey water. I took a sip and looked into those steady dark eyes. I told him that he was a very good man. Then I took a risk and suggested that maybe we should try being together. Adrian froze as completely as a stone statue. Then the usually calm president began stumbling over his own words. He agreed at once. He started to say that he liked it, then corrected himself and promised that he would behave well and do his best. I could not stop smiling. Seeing the cold businessman lose control of language was unexpectedly adorable. I realized that quiet peace like this could sometimes be more valuable than dramatic passion. With the status of trial boyfriend finally established, Adrian seemed to float all the way back to his apartment. The moment he was alone, he rushed online to show off without openly admitting what had happened. He launched a generous prize giveaway that sent my fan community into chaos. Even I quietly entered the discussion and liked his post. I teased him about the mysterious wealthy fan who seemed almost as rich as he was. Adrian nearly suffered a heart attack trying to hide the fact that he was that fan. He claimed that he had no idea who the person might be. To make me happy, the powerful investor also promised to use his influence to move the final filming location to a warm southern city filled with flowers. I smiled, put my hands together dramatically, and thanked the generous President Carter. Winter deepened. The kindergarten became filled with round little children wrapped in padded coats. Charlie waddled into class and struggled with his tiny chair before finally sitting down. Oliver came over with tears in his eyes and asked what Charlie had drawn on the Olympiad paper. Oliver had drawn what he believed was an extremely beautiful car and wanted to know whether the teacher would give him full marks for it. Charlie took a slow sip of warm water and destroyed his hope without mercy. He said the teacher would probably deduct presentation points instead. Oliver looked devastated. Charlie sighed, then helped untangle the scarf that had wrapped around his friend like packing rope. After that, he returned to serious business. He began writing a 3-year development plan for the amusement park so he would be prepared for future battles with Adrian. Most of the words he did not know were still represented by circles. Adrian leaned against the door and examined the pages. He praised the ambitious 3-year plan, then suggested that next time Charlie should try using fewer circles. Charlie lifted his chin and walked past him without offering a single glance. Meanwhile, I was waiting anxiously for the Olympiad results. When Adrian refreshed the website, a shining number 1 appeared beside Charlie's name. He had achieved a perfect score and tied for first place. I grabbed Charlie and kissed his cheek loudly. I told him that all his hard work had been worth it. His ears turned red, but he forced himself to maintain the calm expression of an important businessman. He said it had only been a small exam and that it was easy. The good news doubled when his teacher called to say that several prestigious schools had already shown interest in him. I was so proud that I called everyone I knew. I even woke Ryan just to ask whether he could guess if Charlie had ranked first. Before he could answer, I cheerfully told him that yes, Charlie was indeed number 1. Ryan shouted that he would tell his fans to attack me. I laughed, hung up, and started packing for our final journey to the warm south. Reality, however, chose a completely different direction. Instead of traveling to the flower-filled southern city Adrian had promised, our vehicle suddenly changed course toward Cloudcrest Manor, the old mountain estate of the Carter family. My face went pale when I recognized the route. Our communication devices had already been collected. I understood immediately that this was the arrangement of Adrian's powerful grandmother. The mountain air was cold enough to cut through clothing. An old Carter family steward greeted us with an unreadable expression. Charlie sensed my anxiety and patted my hand. He promised that when we returned home, he would share half of his milk with me. Then he secretly found the steward and asked for thicker clothing for his dad. He explained that his father was physically weak and needed many warm layers or he would get sick. A little later, Charlie staggered into the room carrying a pile of heavy coats almost as large as himself. He told me to put them on because he had asked the steward for them. After a late afternoon nap, I woke to the silence of Cloudcrest Manor. I wrapped myself in 2 thick layers until I looked like a moving black sesame ball. In the living room, Ryan was turning the sofa upside down searching for a hidden treasure. I lazily asked what he was looking for. Ryan glared at me and accused me of having no ambition. The winner of the challenge would become the jewelry representative for Carter Group. That finally caught my attention. The payment was probably excellent. Still, I took Charlie outside for a walk instead of joining the search. In the garden, we accidentally found the director hiding props in a tree. I stared at him and asked whether the production team had not even finished hiding the treasures yet. Because the location had been changed so suddenly, the crew was still repairing the plan while filming. That evening, the main game officially began. Charlie was sent into an old courtyard house to search for clues. He carried too much of my lazy nature. Less than a minute after entering, he came back out and announced that he could not find anything because the staff had hidden it too well. The employee assigned to him almost laughed and cried at the same time. He had to guide Charlie back inside because someone important was waiting there. That was how Charlie met Adrian's grandmother for the first time. She was an imposing elderly woman with her hair arranged perfectly and a cane resting beneath one hand. The moment Charlie failed to greet her according to old family etiquette, she corrected him sharply. She told him to address her properly and asked what Adrian and his father had been teaching him. Charlie immediately copied Adrian's coldest expression. He said she could criticize Adrian if she wanted, but she had no reason to criticize his dad and him too. The first meeting smelled strongly of gunpowder. Charlie wanted to escape and return to bed as quickly as possible. Later he tugged my sleeve and whispered that the old woman's face looked as dark as two Adrians combined. The next morning, Charlie and I wandered through the manor and accidentally entered a fruit garden. We were discussing whether the fish in the pond would taste better braised or in soup when the steward appeared. He respectfully called Charlie the young master of the younger generation. Before I could react, Adrian's grandmother arrived and ordered us to join her for breakfast. The meal felt less like breakfast and more like a ceremony. Hands had to be washed at the proper time. Backs had to remain straight. Food had to be taken in restrained portions. Every movement seemed controlled by an invisible rule. I quietly set down my chopsticks. For the first time, I truly understood the cage that must have driven Adrian's older sister to despair. Even Charlie became so tense that he stopped swinging his feet beneath the chair. He simply ate in silence and waited for the meal to end. When we tried to excuse ourselves afterward, the old woman wiped her mouth and told us not to hurry. There were several matters that needed to be made clear. In the dim main hall of the old residence, she sat above us and announced in the tone of someone granting a favor that it was time for Charlie to return to his ancestors. Carter blood could not be allowed to remain outside the Carter family. I looked directly at her. I said that neither her opinion nor mine should decide Charlie's life. We should ask Charlie himself. She struck the floor with her cane and began speaking about seniority, family order, and obedience. I calmly answered that a family should also understand equality and respect. The tension grew until Charlie suddenly spoke for himself. He said he wanted the surname Shaw. From now on, he wanted to be Charlie Shaw. He did not want the surname Carter. The declaration destroyed the last of the old woman's patience. Her hand shook as she pointed at me and accused me of teaching the child to say those words. I tried to explain that Shaw was a perfectly good surname. She was no longer listening. She ordered the steward to bring a cane. The moment she raised it toward Charlie, fear rushed through me. I pulled him into my arms and prepared to run. A tall figure stepped between us. Adrian had returned. He caught the cane with his bare hand. The impact cut his arm, but he did not release it. He looked at his grandmother with pain instead of anger. He reminded her that his older sister had wanted to escape precisely because she could no longer endure being controlled and punished this way. He asked her not to let the tragedy happen again. Then Adrian took Charlie and me away, leaving the old woman alone in the enormous hall. Back in our room, I helped Adrian remove his coat and treated the wound on his arm. Charlie felt responsible and rushed around trying to help. Unfortunately, his assistance included accidentally tearing a large section of Adrian's sweater sleeve. I gave Adrian one of my own sweaters to wear. It was too tight across his shoulders, yet he looked absurdly pleased. He proudly said that my sweater felt warm and fit him very well. I stared at the stretched fabric and decided not to argue. Our peaceful moment did not last long. A secret photograph appeared online that night. It showed me pulling Adrian into my room. The gossip account claimed that Ethan Shaw was meeting a wealthy sponsor in private and suggested that I had been receiving special treatment on the reality show because someone powerful was supporting me. My fans immediately began defending me. The real wealthy supporter, Adrian Carter, quietly entered one of my fan groups and started sending money to encourage everyone. One fan even sent him an enhanced version of the photograph and asked whether the mysterious rich lady of the group recognized the man standing beside me. The situation quickly escaped control. Internet detectives compared the image with business photographs and confirmed that the man beside me was Adrian Carter, president of Carter Group. Soon everyone demanded an explanation. I found Adrian looking at his phone with a smile he could not hide. He looked less like a man trapped in a scandal and more like someone imagining a wonderful future. I knocked on his door and told him to come eat dinner because the kitchen had prepared fresh mountain mushrooms. He immediately hid his phone and followed me with suspicious enthusiasm. He asked whether he was really allowed to eat with Charlie and me. I laughed and told him that he was the investor. After spending so much money on the program, he should at least eat enough to recover a little of the cost. The moment we entered the dining room, every other guest lifted their eyes from their phones. Silence filled the room. Ryan pointed at Adrian and stammered that he was the man in the photograph. Adrian calmly reached for my hand. Then, with the quiet pride of someone claiming his rightful seat, he said there was no need to arrange another place because he would sit with Ethan. That evening, Adrian sat beside me looking unfairly wounded by the online insults. Some people had described the supposed sponsor as a wealthy middle-aged man with a large stomach. Adrian seemed personally offended. He complained that the comments aimed at me were even worse and said I would certainly be hurt if I read them. I served him a bowl of rich bone soup and told him to drink more instead of staring at the internet. After the lights were turned off, his fingers brushed mine in the darkness. He quietly said that he wanted to hold my hand. Our fingers had barely intertwined when Charlie pushed himself directly between us. He accused both of us of secretly leaving him out. Adrian and I laughed and wrapped our hands around Charlie's small fist instead. Before falling asleep, Adrian whispered that he wanted an official status. He asked what I thought. I pretended to be asleep for several seconds. In the end, I quietly told him that he could do whatever he wanted. Early the next morning, Adrian finally lost his patience when he saw fans enthusiastically pairing me with other men. He used his official account to confirm his identity as the mysterious wealthy supporter who had been following my live streams and sending enormous gifts. Social media exploded. The rich lady who had been handing out money in my fan community was not a lady at all. He was the real president of a major corporation. Adrian became strangely gloomy when people complained that his public statement lacked romance. I handed him a warm bag of milk and told him to stop sulking and eat breakfast. Even if the sky collapsed, breakfast would still be important. Then I leaned close and quietly told him that I had prepared my own public post. I would publish it after filming ended, and he should remember to read it. After that, I sat down with Charlie and explained what love meant. I wanted him to understand that he would never lose my love simply because Adrian had entered my life. Charlie was my son. He would always receive all the love a father could give his child. Charlie nodded thoughtfully. Then he said that the amount of love he had for his dad also seemed to be increasing. With that settled, Charlie entered the final challenge of the reality show. The children were supposed to share clues and cooperate in order to find a treasure. Charlie immediately turned the emotional teamwork exercise into a marketplace. He took out the pocket money he had saved for months and began buying clues from the other children. He offered them money so they could buy jelly and snacks while he took responsibility for the treasure. Within minutes, children were lining up around him to trade information. I stood nearby with my arms crossed, both amused and slightly distressed by how quickly his little wallet was becoming thinner. Evan proudly showed Ryan the stack of coins Charlie had paid him and announced that he could buy many cups of jelly now. I could only marvel at our tiny tycoon. In truth, I was grateful. Charlie's aggressive buying strategy destroyed the production plan for a long emotional cooperation segment and brought the challenge to an efficient end. He delivered all 5 clue pieces to the host with the serious face of a creditor collecting a debt. He made sure that if he handed over the clues, the promised treasure would actually be given to him. The wooden box opened. Inside was a small sparkling crown badge for the winner. Charlie was mildly disappointed that the treasure could not be eaten or sold immediately. Still, when I pinned the crown to his chest, he could not hide his pride. He lifted his chin and stood a little taller. Then his business instincts returned. The other children were staring at the crown with envy. Charlie cleared his throat and announced that anyone who wanted to wear the crown could line up. The price was 1 coin for each turn. In only a short time, more than half of the money he had spent buying clues returned to his pocket. The director and host stared at each other in silence. Neither of them could keep up with the speed of this child's financial thinking. After several ridiculous commemorative photographs, the final filming officially ended. The emotional director nearly cried while everyone returned to their rooms and packed their luggage. Before leaving the manor, I found our cameraman and asked him to take one private photograph for us. Then I ran over and pulled Adrian, who had been standing behind the crew as the investor, directly into the frame. I told him to come closer because we were going to take a family photograph. The moment Adrian heard the word family, every trace of coldness disappeared from his face. His smile became so bright that Charlie secretly sighed and decided his uncle was becoming more foolish every day. Under the warm golden morning light, the three of us stood together. The photograph looked simple and unexpectedly complete. I stared at it for a long time. I had prepared a long statement for the internet, full of explanations about rumors, adoption, the reality show, and Adrian. I deleted all of it. Instead, I posted the photograph with only a few words. A family of 3. Within minutes, Adrian shared it from his own account and added his wish that the 3 of us would remain together for a very long time. The arguments and guesses online slowly disappeared beneath sincere congratulations. I finished packing, took Charlie's small hand, and called to Adrian, who was still reading comments by the door. I told him that filming was over and it was time for us to go home. That strange journey finally ended. Charlie left with a shining crown on his chest, a portfolio of business schemes in his head, and more confidence than any child his age had a right to possess. Adrian left with the official place beside us that he had wanted for so long. And I, a man who had once wanted nothing more than to lie still and avoid every unnecessary responsibility, left with the home I had never expected to find. I had entered this world believing I was only a disposable character in someone else's story. I had believed Charlie was a future villain. Adrian was a distant and dangerous businessman, and I only needed to survive until I could retire. Instead, Charlie became my son. Adrian became the person who waited for me, protected my choices, and slowly taught me that being cared for did not always mean owing someone a debt. Our little family was noisy, complicated, and constantly involved in Charlie's newest attempt to make money. It was also warm. For someone who had spent so much of his life trying to avoid effort, I finally found one thing worth holding on to. Thank you for staying with BL Storytime until the end of this story. If you enjoyed Ethan, Adrian, and Charlie becoming a family, please support BL Storytime with a like and a subscription. I will see you again in the next BL Storytime story.